The Final Fantasy Legend games are actually the first 3 games in Square's SaGa series, created by Akitoshi Kawazu and released for the Game Boy in Japan between 1989 and 1991. The Final Fantasy title was given to the games for their North American releases in an attempt to increase brand recognition, and this SaGa collection packages those first 3 games together for the Nintendo Switch. But can this saga live up to its legend, or was it all just a fantasy? I'm Glen Bolger, thank you to Square Enix for the review code, and now, let's find out. The 3 games all tell their own story, with the first one telling the tale of ascending a tower in search of paradise. The second one had more of a story behind it, having you attempt to track down your lost father whilst also looking to locate the 77 Magi pieces rumoured to make gods of those that possess them. The third game has more of a science fiction element to it and involves the idea of time travel. The Final Fantasy Legend games are turn-based RPGs. The 3 games are quite similar to each other in some respects, but they do also have a few differences to one another, and we'll have a brief look at each one now. The first Final Fantasy Legend allows you to create a main character, having the option of choosing between 3 distinct species. You can be a human, a monster or a mutant. These all have different attributes and we'll look at those in more detail soon, but straight after this you can add 3 more characters to your roster to create a team of 4, and can again choose a combination of the same 3 species. The monster is split into a few different subspecies, and again we'll look at this later. Initially things do look fairly standard in terms of mechanics for an RPG of that time. You will travel on an overworld map, entering towns and talking to NPCs who may reveal small snippets of information that you need, but not much is revealed to the player, and exploration will be the name of the game. Random battles will occur at various intervals on the map screen, and these take place via a first person perspective reminiscent of those seen in the first Phantasy Star game for example. Victory within these battles though is where things are quite different. Basically, the human characters do not level up through battle, and the only way that you can improve their base stats is by equipping them with armour or obtaining certain one-use items that increase the character's statistics. Mutants do level up through battle, although there is a lot of random number generation involved, and this makes them quite an unpredictable class to use. They are capable of using magic, which is a big plus, but as with their stat increases, the spells that they learn are completely random, and to make things even more difficult, when they learn a new spell, it will randomly overwrite one of your current spells should you have reached your limit. This means you could end up worse off than you were before. Monsters on the other hand do not level up through battle and have no item slots. Instead, sometimes after defeating an enemy, they will leave behind a piece of meat. This can be fed to the monster and will cause them to evolve. Again, whether this is a positive evolution or a negative one seems fairly random, although I'm led to believe it isn't random at all, and you can find guides that will allow you to build powerful monsters by eating the correct meats in order. As far as I can ascertain though, there is no information in the game itself detailing this order. As I said earlier, details given to the player are quite scarce, and it can feel quite cruel when a wrong combination of meat consumption knocks your monster back down to starter levels of stats. I was quite taken aback by the variety this system allows the player, and how it means that your choice of characters at the start will affect your playthrough. You can hire new members later in the game, so you aren't stuck with your characters, but they will affect your first few hours of play. It's not perfect by any means. A combination of grinding money to buy the humans the equipment they need, and the seemingly random nature of the other 2 species sees to this, and the spell system in particular has not aged well, but it must have been pretty unique for its time. Another system that I was surprised to find is the life point system. Every character has 3 life points, and should you lose all of your hit points in battle and die, resurrecting this character will see them lose one of those life points. Lose all 3, and that character will stay dead. Again, quite a bold mechanic, and one that really does make you think twice about certain actions. Final Fantasy Legend is showing its age and will frustrate the life out of some people, but I must admit it still has a charm to it, and I was delighted to find out that its sequel refined a lot of the rough edges from the first game and is definitely an improvement. First up, humans now level up through battle, although not in the more conventional way seen these days. Instead, particular skills will increase when used, so if you take more hits in battle, your HP will rise. Use a particular spell or weapon fairly often, and your spirit or strength will improve. Mutants work in a similar way to the first game and will still gain magical spells at random, and they can again overwrite your current spells, but this time only the bottom spell in your inventory will be replaced, so at least it's a bit better. A new class was also added, that of Robot, and whilst they can use practically any weapon or item in the game, the effectiveness of the item will be halved. However, on the plus side, it will no longer be breakable and will refill whenever you rest. The life point system was also removed, and this time if you fall in battle, your party will be revived by Odin. Final Fantasy Legend 3 is the one I've played the least, to be fair, but its differences are quite apparent. Having had a different development team behind it compared to the first two, with Kawazu having moved on to Romancing Saga for the Super Famicom by this point, this one is a more traditional experience with a leveling system used in battle that would be much more familiar to RPG fans of today. Plus, as I said, it has a sci-fi setting, which means that as well as the meat-eating evolutions for monsters, it introduced the idea of adding robotic parts to humans to create cyborg characters. All three games granted you the ability to save at any point outside of battle, which would have been a huge plus back in the day, but the major down point for me is the frequency of the random battles. Random battle encounters and the frequency at which they occur, in my opinion at least, is generally the main area that ages these older turn-based RPGs the most. I've heard that the designers felt that owing to the portable nature of the Game Boy, people may only be playing for 10-minute chunks at a time and therefore needed to have some action every time they played. For this reason, the encounter rate of these battles was upped significantly. This feels like a chore today and did hamper my enjoyment of the games. If this doesn't bother you, then of course factor that into the final score. Control wise, things are fairly standard and they work as well as you would expect. The start and select buttons from the Game Boy originals are assigned to X and Y, which is a little odd but not a major issue, and interestingly you also have the option to turn the Switch vertically and use the touch buttons evident at the side of the screen. This mode looks to emulate the feel of the original Game Boy and does work pretty well, to be fair. Gameplay remains fun to this day but won't be for everyone, and if you're like me, the encounter rate of those battles will really start to get on your nerves, and it scores 14 out of 20. Controls are serviceable and do what they need to do, minus a few odd choices in button mapping from the original, and the touchscreen vertical mode is a nice feature and they score 15 out of 20. In terms of the visuals, things are as simple as you would expect, although to be fair, I liked how there was a different character sprites for each monster type and how these would change when meat was eaten. Backgrounds give the key indicators to help you distinguish where you are, keeping things as varied as the hardware would allow. For this collection you are able to choose between a few different borders with some nice artwork on show, and everything is well presented. I really do feel though that they should have included digital versions of the original game's manuals. The games themselves are quite vague and a lot of the important information would have been in the manuals. Plus, to be honest, it just adds some authenticity to the package as a whole. Audio wise, it could be argued that the Final Fantasy Legend games have some of the most impressive chiptune music produced for the Game Boy. Personally, I always felt as if chiptune music was at its absolute best when it was either conveying a bold or triumphant mood, or on the flip side of this, a more sombre and eerie tune, and you will hear music that sits at the two ends of this spectrum through the course of these games. The visuals are of their time and used what was available to them to tell their tale, but the lack of digital manuals is a real shame and they score 11 out of 20. Audio on the other hand transcends the time in which it was composed and sounds just as good today, and it scores 19 out of 20. Collection of SaGa Final Fantasy Legend costs £14.99, $19 or €19.99 or $29 AUD 95. It will take up just 219 megabytes of your system storage. Whilst all three games could be beaten for a combined time of around 40-ish hours, for anyone who may have to reacclimatise to the vagueness of older games or to those that have never experienced them before, they could well take quite a while longer. This isn't a terrible price for free RPGs, although I do feel that the collection as a whole is a bit lacking, such as with the lack of the manuals that I mentioned earlier. From my understanding, they are some of the easier or cheaper games to acquire for the original Game Boy, but you would no doubt pay more than the £5 each that this collection equates to. On balance, value scores 15 out of 20. To conclude, the three games included on the Collection of SaGa Final Fantasy Legend are still very much enjoyable to play today. The first game does feel a bit too random these days, but the second definitely improves on this, and there are enough differences between the games to make them all worth playing. They absolutely won't be for everyone, but the price is at least accessible enough to tempt those that are curious, and as long as you know what you are getting, you could have a lot of fun revisiting the origins of the SaGa series. Collection of SaGa Final Fantasy Legend gets a SwitchUp score of 74%. Thank you everybody for watching. I hope you enjoyed that review. Please do remember to leave a like if you did. A quick thank you to our Patreons as always for your continued support, and to each and every one of you for watching our videos. Take care, stay safe of course, and until next time, happy gaming.